people of Uganda, recalling our history that has been characterized by constitutional and political instability, are the opening words of the preamble of the 1995 Constitution. But I think that what should have been included is that we should have recognized our human rights history as well. But well, that and much more, we shall focus on the prospects of Uganda in attempts to build itself into a modern state. And that is why that particular constitution has an entire Bill of Rights, Chapter 4, that talks about the rights of people. But also we know that we have gone ahead to ratify so many international conventions, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights of 1948, the International Convention Against Torture, the Maputo Protocol on the Rights of Women, among so many other legislation that we have in this country. But the question is it a question of form versus substance? And to put this into perspective, I'm joined by a panel of distinguished young people, who is now my pleasure to introduce to you this particular afternoon. And a face that you've seen on this show before is Counsel Kahuma, who is an advocate of the High Court, but also the CEO and founder of Simply Legal Uganda, and also an award-winning young lawyer. Terry, thank you for being here.
Thank you so much, Moses, for hosting me.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, we're really looking forward to breaking down all these principles concerning human rights and the state of civic space and governance in our country. Yeah. Yes.
And also, congratulations upon winning that award.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yes, next to Terry is Solomon Nabuyanda. Solomon is also a lawyer, but his interest is particularly around human rights activism. And Solomon joins us for the second time on the Youth Roundtable. Solomon, thank you for being here.
Thank you so much, Kidega. I'm so happy.
I like the African idea.
Thank you as well.
Thank you. Yes, next to Solomon, and the only lady on the show is Natasha Alinda. Natasha is a student of business and accounting at Uganda Christian University, and also she doubles as the vice president of the Business Society. Thank you for being here, Natasha.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm so excited to talk about human rights and the state at which human rights are in right now in Uganda. Yeah. Yes, I'm so excited. Thank you.
Wow, thank you. Yes, next to Natasha and next to myself is Mr. Paul Acaye. Paul is the National Debates Director at the Uganda National Students Association. Paul, thank you for being here.
Oh, thank you very much. And I'm excited to be here, and hopefully this is going to be a very interactive session for us. So we'll be able to learn from each other and make a difference in society.
Wow, thank you. Counsel Terry, I love history because it enables us to appreciate where we have come from. But also societies and nations are built on their history. So just to shade for us that historical perspective, the pre-colonial times, the colonial times, up to where we find ourselves today, what has been our human rights trajectory like?
Firstly, thanks for the opportunity again to be on Civic Space. Now, like you've said, history does repeat itself, and history shows us on where the future is going, or where we're headed to as a nation, as a people, and as a person, because they will say charity begins from home. Yeah. However, we cannot know our future without knowing our past. As we all know, the Western world supposedly developed faster than we did. However, I can always counteract that by saying the ancient Egyptians were the first civilization in Africa. So Africans are the most learned people in the world. Just that the white man had a chance to rewrite history in his own image.
Yeah.
Now, fast forward to that. They colonized us. Uganda became a British protectorate about 1896. So from there on, we became under British rule and tyranny for a while. They took our slave brothers back to their countries, Europe and the United States, and then they began working there. And then they then became the Black Americans, Black Britons, whatever it is. Now, fast forward here in Uganda, they classified 3 categories of human beings. They classified the white people, they classified the half-castes, and the half-castes are on the same level as the Arabs, the Asians, brown people generally. And then they also classified us in our own country and continent as third-class citizens. So that basically made us feel like we were nothing compared to them. And indeed, they made us feel like we do not belong, we do not have a say even in our own country. So they began looting us, they began grossly abusing our human rights. We used to work as slaves, we were beaten, we were not allowed to marry in certain classes, we were not allowed to even marry each other without them knowing it. So basically, we didn't even have human rights. To answer your question, I don't think we had human rights up until the late 1950s is when they began acknowledging that, you know what, blacks can now start working in civil society, like as doctors. That's the emergence of schools, the traditional schools like King's College, Budo, and SMAC and Amagunga, all over the country, were what made us, I don't know, feel like we could at least work in our own country. Then about 1960 is when we began having debates about having our own independence, because we realized that it's not until we're entirely free and own our own country is when we can actually start having our human rights respected. So 1962 we were granted independence, and then we started having our own rights as a people. However, neocolonialism has still existed up to date.
Yeah.
We still see NGOs funded to suit the colonizers' interests. We still see that they always have a hand in what we are doing in our country. Sometimes that's why I actually applaud our president for pushing them back and saying, you know what, this is our country. Let us have our own things that we have to do. You do not have a right to dictate on what we have to do. That's why I also applaud most African leaders, the late Mugabe, Gaddafi, Kagame. They all want to rule Africa as we are as Africans. So after attaining independence, we had the government of Obote, then Idi Amin. But in between that time, there was still a gross violation of human rights. I don't think we really appreciated governance and civic space back then, because we were still young as a people. We had not, yes, we had gone through so much in abuse of our rights, but we had not, so people still did not have so much of a say. At least we could own our businesses, we could do the basics, but to actually stand up to the ruling governments by that time, no, it was quite hard.
Yeah.
The government of Binaisa, Tito Okello, we still had a lot of instability, and of course with instability there cannot be respect of human rights.
Yeah.
We must have a settled government for there to be a torch onto respect of human rights. Now with the coming of the NRM government in 1986, up to date, initially the NRM government had come in with a total policy of, we must respect human rights. As Ugandans, we must have everyone respected, which was a good job was done from about the 1986 up to about 2008. That's what I would say. But later on, the subordinates of our very own president have taken it upon themselves to abuse human rights.
Okay, just to pick it up from there, Solomon, let me get to you. Still on the aspect of our historical perspective, but I want us to focus more on, for example, how do you evaluate our social, political, economic, human rights history? Because you know that in 1938, there was a trade ordinance that barred Africans from trading from the city center, for example. You know that in terms of jurisprudence, Africans could only appeal to an appellant court that was, I think, in UK or the Queen's Court, something like that. So just our historical perspective regarding human rights and where we find ourselves today. But also perhaps you could enlighten us on incidents like the 1966 Kabaka crisis and, the human rights violations therein as we move towards the NRA or NRM era.
You see, Kidega, first and foremost, if you do not know your history, you cannot determine your present status. And if you do not know your present status, you cannot determine your tomorrow. That's an important aspect. Looking back to our history is one that is culminated with ignorance towards human rights. And we are discussing of a generation or discussing of a class of people who could not actually stand up and say that our rights need to be protected. So whatever came at that specific time was actually in the interest of the leaders then, but the people were taken as were taken at ransom of their ignorance. So coming from there, you are going to come to the Kabaka crisis, whereby the Kabaka crisis is happening at a time where we have a small group of enlightened Ugandans who are actually trying to realize and appreciate these human rights, but still the bigger group of Ugandans has not yet appreciated what human rights are. And comparing that to the NRA government, I actually commend President Museveni of 1980, 1986, not of today. Because simply the President Museveni of that time is one that actually took confidence in the likes of the Professor Kanyehambas, the Benjamin Odokis, the Justice Wambuzis, and other people who actually appreciated the law and identified that in the past we did not have a machinery to enforce human rights. Because in the past we did not have the Uganda Human Rights Commission. It did not exist. We did not have organs like the IGG. They didn't exist to actually cause accountability for proper good governance to the people, because it's also another fundamental thing that I have. Part of my rights is access to health, quality health, not health for that. So you see that they realize that what lacked then was the aspect that we did not have a machinery to enforce this. They appreciate this and bring it in the NRA government. But when you look at the NRA government, is one that is actually descriptively interesting on paper, but ugly physically. Simply because they preach wine and give out water. So, more so, what has changed actually from our history in the trace from the Kabaka crisis, because all this happened, limitation to freedom of movement, deportation, away from deportation, we had actually education limitations, which are actually happening right now. But what is interesting is that right now, the machinery is in place, but ineffective. And more so, what is very, 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 very interesting is that the people that occupy this machinery or these organs that are supposed to enforce and realize human rights are highly educated people. People do not know who Mariam Wangadia is, but Mariam Wangadia is one of the intelligent women we had that the legal fraternity has lost in a cadre. If you try to trace her, Chairman Mao will tell you this because they worked at a certain point together. They exchanged ideas together. So what is happening is the politics at play has actually influenced the social and economic rights of our people to a negative extent, as far as history is concerned. Yeah.
Wow, very interesting. Natasha, let me get back to you. We are trying to appreciate our history because, like he said, and also like Councillor Terry has alluded to, history is what formulates our present, but also it enables us to anticipate what the future could look like. So they have given good insights regarding the colonial times and briefly post-colonial. But there are those 8 years of Idi Amin, whereby Idi Amin did not pretend to be a democracy. He did not say that I will give you a constitution. He did not say that I will give you a parliament. He said I will rule by decree. And should you go against what I think is wrong, then I'll issue a decree against you. So I don't know, does a constitution exactly mean respect for human rights? Because not as though we are saying that in the times where we have had a constitution, like in 1967, or even now that we have one, vis-a-vis during the Amin era where we didn't have a constitution, is there any difference between those two times?
Thank you so much for this space and this time. So during Amin's time, things weren't fine. They weren't good at all. And the fact that Amin used to come out and talk about him being a dictator freely, you know. And right now we have a constitution. A constitution is meant to give people freedom and their rights, which is there. And my brother Solomon talked about how the constitution is really written. It looks good on paper, but then when it comes out, they actually don't put it in practice. People's rights are not put in practice. They're not allowed. So the constitution itself is nice. It is a good thing. But then also putting it into action is another. So the first step should be a constitution, which is a tick. Then the second one should be putting it into consideration. So Amin's time, truth be told, it wasn't a very good one.
Yeah.
And they had to put a constitution, yeah, for Amin's time. Then is there a difference between Amin's time and now? No. There is a very small difference because they're going to pretend the constitution is there. They're advocating for our rights, a right to education, a right to all the things you're seeing, freedom of speech, information, privacy. But really, is anything being taken on? No. So Amin's time and now, the difference is this big.
It's quite
very.
There is almost no difference.
There is no difference.
All right, Paul. Still, because I want to give you all a chance to give us your perspective regarding the historical evolution of human rights in Uganda. But as we move towards the towards the NRM era, is that we saw, is it the Ode Commission that I think traversed the country regarding, I think, human rights issues and come up with the report, and that I think informed Chapter 4 of our Constitution. Just I want to bring you on the point where he mentioned that the politics has gotten itself at the center of human rights, all right? But we cannot avoid politics in itself. So just as we evaluate now the NRM era, how have they performed regarding human rights? Because what I know is that I'm going ahead to ratify so many international laws, all right, that are supposed to uphold and defend, protect the rights of Ugandans. So how do you evaluate the NRM from 86 rather, when they captured power successfully, up to date? How do you evaluate them?
Thank you very much, Kidega and my colleagues. I think as we get into understanding the role of government or how they've been trying to carry on the issues of human rights, it's important for us to understand the mind to which the human rights protection is handed to. Like what kind of people are receiving these obligations to ensure that the rights of people are protected? Do they in the first place understand what human rights are? Do they know the foundation under which human rights are built? If they then don't understand, then it means you are simply giving them something that they don't know how to hold. And that explains why at implementation phase of every aspect of human rights in this country, there has been a problem. Because the people who are mandated to ensure that they preserve, how do you preserve something that you don't understand in the first place? For a matter of fact, two things here: politics and human rights. One takes precedence, right? Human rights takes precedence. Then politics comes in to preserve the rights that are already inherent in the people, that people are supposed to enjoy. Now, understand that I wouldn't really say that the government of NRM really did not do anything in as far as preservation of the people's rights are concerned. But I think that over time, there's been a lot of back and forth as a result of different political interests.
Yeah.
There are rights that are clearly, for as long as they protect the interest of government, then we call them rights. For as long as they do not protect the interest of government at that instance, then it's a violation. That's why then people, they will tell you constitution have a right to expression. Yeah, that's why eventually we have the public management bill, you know? So we can't sit and really have that safe space to speak about what matters in society. So I think government lost it out at a point because the people who are given mandate don't understand what human rights is. They don't understand the aspects that it's actually universal, but also it's plural. You know, if one right is okay, why does the other one become wrong? You know, those are dynamics that I felt that government lost out. And I think that it's high time government regrouped, you know, to reevaluate from the history and see that they can now have a very good start going forward.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, fair enough. Terry, let us begin to shift gears a little bit, all right? And I want to put you on the podium to help us evaluate the basic structure doctrine, all right? Because scholars like Professor Ben to Sasiri have argued that because we altered with certain provisions of the law, like Article 102B regarding age limit, or even Article 105 regarding term limits, that because we altered with such provisions of the law, we affected the entire basic structure doctrine of the Constitution. And that therefore issues around human rights are going to become secondary because you have a lifetime presidency. But also we know that there are other aspects of the Constitution that espouse the basic structure doctrine, all right? Like, for example, the right to property. You know, that is a neoliberal idea that you have a right to possess whatever you wish to possess. But just the basic structure doctrine, do you think that it is high time we had an entire constitutional overhaul? Has the basic structure doctrine of the Constitution been affected with these so many amendments? Can it protect the rights of Ugandans the way it is right now?
No, it can't.
Why?
That is the honest reality.
Why?
I'll let me first laugh a bit. Unfortunately, we have been compromised so much because, like my brother here, Solomon, said, on paper, it's wine. But in reality, they're serving water.
Yeah.
The way the Constitution was initially in 95 was brilliant.
Yeah.
That was what was going to take Uganda to the next level. And we're on a very good trajectory. Very good. However, when you look at the basic structure doctrine, when you look at Article 102B, that was looking at age limits and also term limits.
Yeah.
Because one of them, I mean, both of them move in tandem. You cannot do one without the other. Once you remove term limits, then basically human rights are not going to be respected. Why? Because I like to give an example of the United States. I really like the way they govern their country. The government is accountable to the people. The people are accountable to the... So all of them move in a check and balance kind of style.
Yeah.
Now, if the ruling party and president are not accountable for how long he can hold on to power, or for how long the ruling party can go in this loop a number of times, because now we have we recently celebrated 37 years on NRM Day.
Yes.
So I agree with some of the things that the NRM government does. I don't agree with some of the things. When you see, the basic fabric of society is so delicate in that if you remove one structure, it's like removing a pillar from a building. Once you remove one, you see there are other pillars that can be removed and still the major pillar will not be removed. That's in the center of the building, or at least one of the central corners of the building. Now, Article 102B was that center. The moment that is removed, then that means that the current president and government is not accountable to the people. But they'll state that the people are accountable to us, but us not accountable to you. So once Article 102B was removed, that means that it leaves leeway for the government to keep amending to their interests. They keep tailor-suiting it to their interests. It's like if me and you enter an agreement and then a bigger party is selling land to me at 1 billion shillings. He says, it's okay, I'll sell to you the land, but at the same time, I want it to be a bank transfer. At the same time, I want you to kneel down when I'm giving you the 1 billion shillings. At the same time, I want you to do this. So the odds are stacked against you in his favor. So that's normally what happened once Article 102B was removed. That means that a president can even rule for like his baby lifetime up to like 100 years and will have like the same government rotating. So they have left certain provisions of the constitution for the ruling party, and which is the majority, but they'll still masquerade and have, you still have a right to property, you still have a right to this, you have a right to this. So yes, we're entitled to few things that they're allowing us to have, because remember, by 95 they were the framers of the constitution. They were the ones that made it so they, in their minds, they have a right that we can still amend it to suit our interests. However, they will tailor it to these are to Uganda's interests. We still have Vision 2040. We still see a pathway for you. But in actual sense, it's infringing on human rights, meaning human rights are now taking the boot seat, not even the back seat of the car. Yeah.
Wow, interesting. Council, 1990, Uganda ratified the International Convention on Civil and Political Rights. I have seen you very active in political discourse, but largely either from the Forum for Democratic Change or from the National Unity Platform. So, but also we know that Uganda has embraced a multi-party dispensation, all right? So my question is regarding the civil and political rights of Ugandans. We have a multi-party dispensation. We have routine elections every 5 years, all right? We have what you'd call a presidential or parliamentary system, or it's a hybrid of both. I don't know, can you say that we are progressing in terms of the civil and political rights of Ugandans?
You see, one, for purposes of record, I'm not a card-holding member of the Forum for Democratic Change. That should go on record. Then also the other thing I want to say is people think I'm a radicalist or I'm radical simply because I want to appreciate the reality, the facts as they are. One is all these treaties we are talking about as far as human rights is concerned are not practical in Uganda. Because ratification is not domestication of laws. If at all these laws were ratified and we took them important, Parliament wouldn't be spending so much time debating less important. I'm using the term less important simply because they are the issues they debate. It's not that they are useless, but they are less important. They are not the priority at the time, but should spend more time debating certain draft bills that should be domesticating these laws, international treaties we ratify. We ratify. That is most important for us to note here. Then secondly, it's so absurd and it will also do us a disservice, and I'm very sure it will be a bad precedent that on 14th February, which is supposed to be Valentine's Day, we really spent time here discussing human rights to be politics, to be elections. Because in Uganda, what Museveni regards as human rights, or what he regards as democracy, is elections. To him, if you ask him, where is equality, where is equity in resource distribution, where is justice in the temples of justice, in the judiciary, where is transparency in the judiciary, he's going to tell you that don't you see the opposition taking petitions to court and they win? Which is, I think, a very wrong aspect, because politics is a game. And to the unsuspecting members of society, you realize that they will not actually pay attention to what makes the politics. But what makes the politics are the interests. So we cannot actually limit the discussion of human rights to the political space. We shall have to take a litmus test to the judiciary, a litmus test to torture, because today torture is the order of the day. And our laws actually put punishments for people that have actually perpetrated torture. 15 years, and aggravated torture is life imprisonment. Life imprisonment. But what is so shocking is Kakwenza was produced before court, and the people that produced Kakwenza before court are security operatives, which security operatives are known to this government. If you do not know who tortured Kakwenza, then the officer in charge should account. By now, he should be prosecuted to account for the deeds to Kakwenza. I've seen the images of Eric Mwesigwa, who was burnt on the breasts. It's ugly. It's ugly. And you know what is very interesting? This torture comes about from the too much security divisions we have. You hear ISO, PISO, ATE UPDF, ATE CMI, ATE GISU, all these. They give too much powers to the sect leaders. You see that the head of ISO is ordering for the torture of my brother here. You see that the head of GISU or PISO, whatever it is, ordering for the torture of Kidega, without actually maybe the knowledge of the head of state. And for us, the person we are going to hold accountable is the president. Because once things fall apart, the center cannot hold. But going back to the discussion you're giving me is, we haven't had any advancement.
Because can we say that because we have a multi-party dispensation, all right, we have, for example, the Political Parties and Organizations Act. I mean, we have all these laws that indicate that we are progressing towards a multi-party dispensation. So can we say that Uganda is moving towards upholding civil and political rights?
You see, if Mulago Hospital admitted 100 patients now and 99 died by 4 p.m., we would actually say that Mulago is ineffective. So we cannot use that as a litmus test for the advancement of human rights in Uganda. So basically what is happening in Uganda is the record is straight. The papers are actually very insightful. At a certain point, Uganda's constitution was ranked as the best constitution on the continent. But today, when you look at what happens in Uganda as far as Chapter 4 is concerned, as far as the treaties we ratify in regards to human rights, defense and protection is concerned, you will actually resolve at one thing: there is no law in Uganda.
All right, let me hear from Natasha. Alinda, still on Chapter 4 is Article 33 that is about the rights of women, all right? But also Uganda is signatory to the Maputo Protocol of Mozambique that still, puts states to account on the aspects of empowering women, rather. So as we discuss human rights, the rights of women, all right, in the political spaces, in the economic and the social, of course, as you evaluate this, you'll bring in the aspect of the gender-based violence and all these things. But also the political aspect is that today we have a vice president who is a woman, you have a speaker of parliament, then you have the prime minister. So the rights of women, is it only about, okay, is there a correlation between the political offices being assumed by women vis-a-vis the social issues like access to maternity health, access to all these things? Okay. I don't know, the rights of women.
So I would first start with the point of violation is by the government and abuse is by the citizens. So citizens themselves can abuse the rights of fellow citizens.
That's right.
And also the government can violate the rights of the citizens.
That's right.
So about the human rights, first of all, I want to thank the government that they recognize and they give women rights. That's a very, very good step to start with. But the positions women are assuming political positions, it's a good step because there is representation for women in those it shows that women can also do something once given opportunity. They can work efficiently, like the prime minister. Everyone, there is no Ugandan, even a Ugandan in Karamoja who doesn't know the prime minister.
Is it about knowing?
It's not about knowing. She has done something.
Okay.
Yes.
She is known for her deeds, for her good deeds.
Yes, okay. She's doing something. I don't want to compare the former prime ministers with the current prime minister, but at least you can see there is something being put in position. The other thing about the human rights for women, gender-based violence is something that was so rampant during the COVID time. Most of you saw mothers, women being beaten, fights, homes breaking up, and this was because of the torture of COVID. But still, it doesn't justify COVID. The trauma of COVID does not justify the gender-based violence. And the gender-based violence is not only for the women, though the women are the majority, but then something should not justify wrong. That's my point. And for human rights for women, again, for human rights again. For you talked about women.
Those, because I was trying to ask that, is there a correlation? Because over time we have seen women assuming powerful political offices. So the question is, does that rise of political prowess for the women translate directly into the social issues that the young girl faces, like teenage pregnancies, like access to maternal health? Like I said, we have so many women who still die giving birth. So my question is, these women who have assumed these elite political positions, have they been able to advocate for the rights of the woman at the grassroots level who dies giving birth.
Yeah, thank you for putting me back on course.
Yeah.
Definitely, it has changed the percentage. A woman taking up a position, it has changed. But remember, them taking up positions does not change that the rules that the law that happens in the hospitals or the funds that are provided to the health centers are the ones, these people, the women holding the positions are the ones that bring them up. Definitely, they may bring them up by the parliament. The parliament decides. Then the other thing also, the distribution of the money. Well, that has changed. You can see that Mulago, it has changed compared to the past years with the maternity provision, the hospitals changing. It has changed, but still, it's still in a worrying process. In a worrying stage, whereby if you visit some of the hospitals, you might even find one bed, you know, the others sleep on polythene, you know, bags to give birth. So it changed, yes, but not to a big extent.
Well, and of course, we have to note that that insufficiency in our health care, of course, comes at the backdrop of us ratifying the Abuja Declaration that did hold governments to, you know, commit 15% of their national budgets towards the health sector. So, well, all those continue to be aspirations for us as a country. But, Paul, you work in an education institution, all right? The right to education. Uganda, I think by bandwagon effect, you know, jumped into the structural adjustment programs, which in my view was a neoliberal, you know, way of trying to transform the world towards the capitalistic idea. But how has this affected education? Because recently we have students who are joining senior one, but the school fees is unthinkable, all right? So as we discuss human rights in general, the right to education, all right? Now you compare the private schools that are of course profit-oriented vis-a-vis the government universal primary education and USE and its quality. So I don't know, how are we moving on with the right to education? Is it a right or it is a commodity?
Thank you. Thank you. Is it a right or it's a commodity? Before I really respond to that question, I want to pick up a little from my sister here. Initially, I said the rights cannot be, you know, segmented and looked at in isolation. And then we say now, since women are rising to positions, then there is human rights, right? So if women are rising in position and yet a girl in Karamoja cannot afford a sanitary towel, a girl in Jumani cannot go to school, a girl in somewhere in Kabale, you know, cannot actually speak out when she's being violated at home sexually. There are sexual harassments. We even see in universities people paying for, you know, having sex for marks, you know, that to that extent. So we really can say that because A is happening and all the rest are not happening, we can't qualify that to really say we have human rights being preserved. That means it's a very huge problem. Now back to your question. You see, the rise in school fees, first of all, we think that every child has a right to education. Ideally, ideally, we should not be paying any money to go to school. Government,
Article 31?
Yes,
around there, right? Education,
government should actually take care of every person's right to education. There should be things put in place so that everybody can attain not just education, but quality education. Yeah. So you realize that most of, with the introduction of UPE, even in UPE, people are charging money. You know, somebody is not able to finish school because they are charging this kid 50,000. The future is gone. This is our future minister. This is our future doctor. You know, the challenge is that, back to reality, we have we operate in what I would call, some people call it a military government, but I prefer calling it a Machiavellian government. When you read the book called The Prince, Niccolo Machiavelli in his book clearly shows you how one can consolidate himself to power by ensuring that certain things are not done and certain things are done. Now, the biggest aspect in building a nation is empowering people mentally. The moment you cripple their mental ability, you can now float on them the way you want. And for so many years, this is what has been happening. Now, things like political education, sciences was removed from schools. It was strategic to ensure that we do not know our history, we lose our identity, right? When we lose our identity, we then do not know where exactly to speak, what to speak. So we are in confusion. So at the end of the day, when we are looking at women coming to positions, then we applaud, and yet so many girls are not going to school. So we are blind to that fact and appreciating this other fact if it suits the interest of the ruler at that particular time. So we really think that, number one, I would also really take this opportunity to let us know that once the generation is not educated, we will not know our rights as a country. We'll lose our identity. Now, through those structures, because people who run schools are poor, so they go to lobby for funds to run their schools. So when they go to lobby for funds, like in the UK, they will give them conditions. While in your schools promote homosexuality. That's what you are seeing. While in your schools make sure like these children, as they grow, they start using, as young as they are, the sex education that they are taught is not of their age, age at that time. That's what we are seeing. But largely, majority are not able to afford even food at school. Children walk a long distance to go to school, no food. The teachers in schools are poor people. Now, as they try to get themselves to schools, at the end of the day, they're looking at not really the impact, the rightful impact in the life of these children, but what are they able to go with at home, which is still a very, very big problem. So I think via education, there is a lot that we have to do. So we call upon government.
Okay, can you just put into perspective the aspect of privatization?
Yeah. You see, most of the people running private schools, or in terms of education, are people in government. There are people in government running a lot of these private schools. So they're interested in making money. Privatization is all about making money. They're making money. So at the end of the day, once they increase tuitions in their schools, they leave others with no choice. And yet, government schools do not tend to even in government schools, they are charging money. So where do those marginalized people go? So at the end of the day, kids are getting to their homes at age of 14. And what do you expect of them? That's where problems eventually escalate from.
It's appalling, isn't it, Terry? But Terry, just the good French philosopher Montesquieu argued the aspect of separation of powers. That the executive, the judiciary, and the legislature must operate independently. But retired Chief Justice Benjamin Odoke said that these should be seen as cooking stones on which a pot sits, that without one, the pot cannot stand. So the question is, as we evaluate human rights, all these three arms of government have a role to play. The legislature must enact laws that favor human rights. The judiciary must, of course, interpret, but also enforce or put into force these human rights provisions. But of course, the executive as well, they must implement these policies, but also initiate the policies, if I'm to call it. Have they all performed their role? You look at Parliament passing the Computer Misuse Amendment Act, all right, that deprives people of their right to freedom of speech. Then you look at courts of law declaring it null and void. But also of the landmark decision of Charles Onyango-Obbo. All right. So as we evaluate the three arms of government, are they playing their role in terms of human rights protection in this country?
I had first clear my throat for that. Before I even answer that, because I'm so fired up to answer your question, I'll first add on to what my brilliant colleague has submitted. He gave a fantastic submission. You see, I'll just add on what he says and I'll go to your question. He is very right. Once you cripple a person mentally and financially, you have total autonomy over that person. Once people are not educated and sensitized about the law, about their rights, about political education, and about economic education, you have crippled them mentally. But also, when you cripple them financially, that means that they cannot afford to even sensitize themselves. The reason why the Western world looks into African countries, especially in Uganda, so much. You look at a lot of the aid that is given to Uganda. You have Danish aid, we have from Netherlands. Recently, someone sent me something concerning legal tech, but that's something I'm so much involved in. But I saw that the Netherlands government wants to empower Ugandans and see who is in this space of disseminating information to the people. Do we have a political person? Do we have a legal person? Do we have an economic person? So they're trying to find their best way on how they can educate the basic Ugandan on socio-economic, legal and political arms. So I would really agree with what my brother here said. The fact that we are curtailed politically and mentally, that means that we cannot know our rights, we cannot know what's happening in our country, and we cannot stand up to the government to have checks and balances and to account for what is happening all over our country. Because we see all of these things. We see Sewanyan and Sejirinya. We are seeing people like Kakwenza. But then at the same time, they will do things that will kind of appease the people. They will give like free borders, electrical borders. So it's more of a game. I do some bad things, I do some good things. And the good things are to kind of, to keep people at bay. So the oppressor or oppressors in every country all over history, even Machiavellian governments and also kingdoms that ruled in the previous years, like the French Revolution. Once you control someone's finances and also what they read and what they are shown on TV, you have them totally. So one way we can improve on our education and have the future of our country moving forward is, one, educate the school-going children about economic viability. How can they make money for themselves without relying on the government? Because now the government gives you handouts and they expect you to be grateful for it. They hand you out UPE and USE and expect you to be grateful for it. And yet they also control what you take in. Because most Ugandans they will not be so much interested in political, education, or economic. They just want to set up their business, make their small money, and go back and sleep. So, and I think Kenya has done a very good job in trying to balance out the two. Kenyans are very hardworking people, and they also educate themselves legally and politically. So they will have a balance. That's why you can't find a president in Kenya running for even more than 20 years. It's impossible. They will riot, they will fight, they will what? But because they're also hard-hearted people, they believe in what they can offer as a people, and they want their governments to be accountable to them. So that was my submission on his. To answer your question, we have three arms of government. We have the legislature, we have the executive, and we have the judiciary. Now, I'll take it back to our own African way of cooking. We have the cooking stones and we have a pot which cooks food. Now, the food is a country. The people, even the government is part of that. But those arms of government are part of are the stones. The executive is supposed to be the one to think about how can we push our country forward? How can we move? The legislature then comes up with the laws, following up on what the executive has thought about. Now, the legislature will, I believe it has been compromised in a certain way, because when you look at issues like the Computer Misuse Act, that is really curtailing our freedom of expression and speech. And that is the very fabric of why a nation exists. If I cannot have my own independent way of thinking in a country, and you're limiting it with small bills like Computer Misuse Act, and then like Public Management Act, it shows you that your right to speech, your right to free speech is there, but it's limited. You can't say certain things. Now, when you see the judiciary coming in and challenging things like offensive communication under Section 25, it shows you that the judiciary, you see, judicial officers are lawyers. They are lawyers, but they've just been made judges. By the time God put in that position of managing someone's lifeline, I would say lawyers, judicial officers are like doctors. You in a way represent someone's essence. So these judges are just former lawyers. They're saying, you know what? The Computer Misuse Act is actually useless, because I was in that position before where I was fighting for someone's freedom of speech or their rights. So when you see them challenging a law which has been put in place, then that means that they are trying their best to come out of the soil and keep their independence under Article 126, because independence of the judiciary is stipulated under 126.
Yeah.
But so many times judges are compromised. They are compromised throughout. If a judge is presented with a case of, let's say, Sejurinya versus Nsereko, they're going to rule in favor of Nsereko because Nsereko is government. He's pro-NRM. Sejurinya will forever lose, or any new person or BSG or what. That is the honest reality. I'm non-partisan for purposes of record, but I like to speak the reality. If the judiciary so many times is being compromised, then we don't have a judiciary, because many times the judges are appointed by the ruling party. So you cannot tell him he's going to rule in favor of the person who appointed him. If Moses, if I gave you a job and I'm paying you 25 million shillings untaxed, you're not going to go out in the public and speak against the company. I may not do anything to you, but it brings up a rocky relationship between us. And in most cases, those people are going to be transferred to, like, let's say, an uptown court where they can't rule so much in
favor of
of the ruling party.
Yeah.
So that's what I basically have to say.
Yeah, thank you. Solomon, as we take a short commercial break, I have to give you a chance to also give your perspective regarding separation of powers, because I know that there is a landmark decision in the case of Gerard Karuhanga, whereby, the issue, because why I bring that is on the aspect of, because he mentioned independence. Is the independence about the mode of appointment of these judicial officers, all right, which has over time been challenged in court. And I think that the Gerard Karuhanga case was a missed opportunity for us as a country. But we know that subsequently, in the Kahuma case, court has declared that the appointment of judges in acting capacity is actually unconstitutional. So the question is the independence of the judiciary compromised by mode of appointment, but also as you evaluate generally the three arms of government?
You see, Kidega, I can say first and foremost, it's too unfortunate that we are in a broken state of arms of government, and the judiciary is left limping of the three organs, because you realize that the president has powers, and when I refer to the president, I refer to the judiciary, rather to the executive as a whole. A minister can threaten a judge.
It happens on a daily basis.
It has happened on a daily basis. Recently, we saw Kahuma in Luweru calling a magistrate, intimidating them on phone, on camera. And where did Kahura's appointment come from? Up. The powers that be cannot let the independence of judiciary stand.
Then there was the Prime Minister's incident about last year, where the Prime Minister went to, I think, court and did something.
Actually, recently, where the Right Honorable Nabuyanda gets into court and she chairs a meeting where a magistrate is a party to answer, the state is a party to answer. This is disturbing. And this means a lot to us that actually criticize this government, and it makes our work easy. The work of criticism, we no longer have to use philosophies, what we just need to refer to these incidents. I'm happy that you can point out the Prime Minister's incident, and what made me happy was the fact that in the meeting of judges, the Chief Justice came out and condemned this act when the Prime Minister was present. So arrogancy of government officials, a mode of appointment of government officials. 3, competence. Because when you look at most of the judges that have been, you realize that some of them have not practiced ever in their life. Therefore, they cannot appreciate law principles. He has come from, maybe he's a relative of Justice Mulenga, who died some time ago, and was a friend to the president, and the president made a pledge in the burial of Mulenga. So now they have to pay to fulfill the pledge. So the competence as well has compromised the independence of the judiciary and ambition. You see, we are in a state where competence cannot place you higher.
It's no longer on merit.
Yeah. It's no longer on merit, it's on sentiment. I can influence the PPS to the president. And the PPS to the president has direct access to the president, who will actually influence my appointment as a justice of the Supreme Court. And what has happened is the concept of judicial activism that had started coming up, where we see the Kakurus, the Kanyehambas, the Benjamin Odokis, the Musotas standing out to legislate from the bench, actually has died out. Has died out because the competence has been compromised by appointment, by arrogancy from government officials, and the need to actually create an impression to the president to elevate me. And I want to conclude
two things still on that. Is that an indictment on the Judicial Service Commission? Because by law, it is them supposed to recommend judicial officers for appointment by the president.
Recently, there was an incident, for lack of actually the straight name, I will not cite the name, where one of the judges had been petitioned before the same Judicial Service Commission, and the petition was by Malema Birizi. And they were trying to say, where is the recommendation? Where is the letter of recommendation sent to the president recommending this judge to be in this position? And the Judicial Service Commission has never answered that question up to now. And what they have also done at times is to point at politics. They're saying that these are politicians trying to taint the image of the judiciary. Yet at the end of the day, we have, even if it's politics, at times, there is what we call the substantive outstanding issues. Have you addressed it? Of course, no. What Mariam Wangadi is doing in the commission. Not addressing these substantive issues that are being raised, even when they are raised by politicians. And what crime is it to be a politician?
Exactly. Because my thinking is that the mischief behind establishing a judiciary is to address disagreements, is to arbitrate, all right?
Definitely.
There are political contestations that if you lock out the opportunity for them to be addressed in the judicial platform, then you open a floodgate for extra constitutional means of how to resolve constitutional issues.
Definitely.
So court must open itself to the political discrepancies out there. They cannot avoid it.
Definitely, but you have the right thinking in the wrong status quo. You have the right thinking in the wrong status quo. Things are vice versa. And once things are abnormal, we cannot combat them using the normal ways. Never. So what must happen is what you have been seeing. Getting victims of torture, bringing them to media, because the judiciary is not going to serve their interests. And why are we doing this? One, of course, personally, I do not agree with it. Like what has been in the media, getting one Alexandria who was burnt the behind, and it's put on media, getting one Eric Mwesigwa who was burnt on the chest and putting it in media. What is the effectiveness? But it's the only option left. Because where we are supposed to get solutions, the solution is not there. And I also want to disagree with him, of very many people that actually condemn what is happening in schools to do with homosexuality. One, I am not a homosexual, and I do not support them. But homosexuality is not a crime in Uganda. We do not have any law in Uganda that actually places homosexuality as a crime.
We do.
Which law is that?
The anti-homosexuality bill.
Which was actually
the one of the Honorable David Bahati.
Which was actually downplayed by...
Let's begin from that after the short commercial break. This is all about human rights today. We shall discuss human rights from all corners. But thank you for making a date with us. Keep it right here. Let's take a short commercial break and see you after this.
Digital rights are those human rights and legal rights that allow individuals to access, use, create and publish digital media, or to access and use computers, other electronic devices and telecommunication networks. Digital rights include a right to freedom of expression, information and communication through technology, a right to privacy and data protection, a right to credit for personal works, a right to universal and equal digital access. a right to identity, a right to anonymity, a right to be forgotten, and a right for protection of minors, among others. The state's digital rights are frequently violated through various unfair actions, for example, blockage of websites and social networks, theft of credentials, unauthorized use of people's data for personal gain, privacy intrusion, online censorship, arrests and intimidation of online users, internet blockages, and the proliferation of laws and regulations that undermine the potential of technology to drive social, economic, and political development worldwide. It is hence every citizen's responsibility to respect rights of other digital users and to speak out or report to the responsible parties when one's rights are violated.
We'll be back from that short commercial break. Well, let's just dive straight from where we stopped. And I'll begin with you, the only lady on the panel, Alinda. And my question is that there is a good professor called Professor Evidaisi, who made a very good analysis of the rule of law, but under which he mentioned things like democracy, things like human rights. But I want us to focus on democracy as a tenet for preservation of human rights. Take an example of China. China, you cannot say they are exactly a democracy, all right? They only have, I think, one political party. It is a single party state, if I'm to call it, all right? But we don't hear so many human rights violations. Then countries in the sub-Saharan Africa that I don't want to mention names, but that we all know of, is that they purport to be a democracy, all right? They have all these principles of, regular elections and things like that. So is there a correlation between democracy and human rights?
Yes, there is, but not in a country whereby the president wants to be a dictator or wants to rule forever. Yes, there will be a camouflage of elections, but then we all know that the same person is coming back over and over again. So with that person coming over and over again, they have to protect themselves, and while protecting themselves, a person cannot speak freely, and that's where the computer misuse will come in, because a Ugandan cannot come and say the president has overstayed or this person is doing this. So most of the human rights will be locked in some place whereby no one can touch. That for me, that's my submission on that.
All right. Paul, the lawyers will tell you that there is Article 44 of our Constitution that stipulates non-derogable rights. Those ones are non-negotiable. The rest, the state can consider giving you or not giving you, all right? But these four, they are non-derogable. And one of them is freedom from torture. Media has been awash for the past couple of days and weeks with disturbing images of citizens whose chests bear, flat iron marks. Those who, I don't know, they are disturbing images. As we evaluate freedom from torture in Uganda, this comes at the wake of, I think there's a law against it. There's the Anti-Torture Act of 2012, I'm not sure, around there. So, freedom from torture, I don't know, what is happening in your own views? Who is torturing Ugandans, if you had to ask?
Thank you. One, I wanted to say something small. When you asked her that question, I imagined if Uganda were a book, if Uganda were a book that somebody has to read, then Uganda is like the most democratic state, if it were a book. Earlier on, my brothers were saying, Uganda, we preach a lot of wine, but give people water. So in reality, what exists in Uganda is different from what is in the books. The books say different things, and what is on ground is different. It's very unfortunate that the rate at which people are being tortured is so alarming. And when you ask yourself who is torturing Ugandans, obviously Uganda is made up largely the Ugandans in Uganda. So where government has a role to play from the social contract theory, government has mandate to ensure that the people are peaceful and they're not really being violated as such. So if you are supposed to ask who is responsible, then you go back to the social contract theory. And as government, you are responsible. Why are people being tortured and actually getting no justice at the end of it? So then there is a problem. So one, when you look at the people who are being tortured, these are taxpayers. These are taxpayers. These are some people's fathers. These are some people's mothers. You know, if the humanitarian nature could appeal to us, I think government would wake up and ensure that really, in as much as there's the law, but on ground it's different. What you're seeing is totally different. So I really think that from that background, the government should be answerable. Why are Ugandans being tortured? Because we have a contract. We have a contract with government. If the government cannot explain, then they are actually entirely responsible. So I think when you look at how police beats up people, who employs police, they're within the structures of government. You know, when you see army guys beating up people, that within the structure. When you see civilians beating up other people, still within, because government has to keep checking what is happening. So inherently, I really feel that government is responsible, and government should be able to make statements. Yeah, because if this should end, then government can end it. Yeah.
Terry, many have argued that we now live in what they call a global village. All right. My own view and perspective is that we have villages around the globe. All right. That people are still stuck in their nationalistic views and ideas. Why do I bring this up? Because on the aspect of torture, can the international community hold sovereign states accountable? Because we have seen the International Court of Justice coming out to say that Uganda did participate in the plunder of timber and gold in DRC Congo, in Kinshasa. And they're going ahead to levy sanctions, financial sanctions against us. Why haven't they come out to take drastic measures against countries and governments that are abusing and violating internationally accepted human rights? Is there certain levels of hypocrisy, if I'm to call it, at the international level, that they only come in on economic interests, all right? Because timber and gold, those are all economic, you know, related. Then issues of human rights, they can come and when they want to and when. So the role of international institutions in holding sovereign states accountable on issues around torture.
You see, in life, there must always be a balance. There's a give and take. There's what the Chinese call the yin and the yang. I'm sure you've seen the black and white in a circle. Now, life order cannot exist without chaos. I think it's a bit confusing, but that's my analogy. Why do I say this? The Western world, I'll say, are hypocrites. That is the honest truth. They only come in when it suits their interest. If President Museveni wakes up and says, I do not like homosexuality, and he has openly said it on media, Mugabe of Zimbabwe said it, Kenyatta has said that homosexuality was not an issue in Kenya during his reign, and I'm sure that's going to remain the same. In states where Western influence has really taken centerfold, African states like South Africa, they will accept LGBT. Why am I bringing LGBT? It's because the Western world will solely, properly, and willingly finance homosexuality as a human right. Now, in a state like Uganda, where we do not agree with it, we even criminalize it under Section 45 of the Penal Code Act. Not directly, but it's seen as an unnatural act. Once they term it as human rights and we don't give a clear stance about it, then they will not respect rights of people who are being tortured. They'll just come out on social media and say, you know, President Joe Biden has issued a statement. I'm sure you're going to see it. Has issued a statement that since the office of the Human Rights Commission for the UN has been closed off in Uganda, this is wrong. All of us need to be accountable. They will say that. They will just say it on the surface that You need to stop torturing no people or anyone who stands up against government. But if roundtable discussions are made and our presidents or presidents in Africa do not accept human rights which suit their interests, then they'll also not take the rights of the citizens so serious if their interests are not sorted out. So the Western world has a very hypocritical approach towards our human rights. They'll accept some. If it's like Moses, if I tell you I want you to take me to Mukono, and you had wanted money from me, let's say I wanted 1 million shillings from me, but I give you so many conditions for you to, for me to give that 1 million shillings. I tell you, you must take me to Mukono, you must do this, you must do this. You badly need the money to feed your family. I mean, if your family starves, I'll say, oh, this is really bad. Moses' family starved, but I put you through so much to get that 1 million shillings. Then I think that's what the Western world does. If their interest, if the rights they're interested in are not fully clear cut in African nations, then your other rights, people being burnt, they will look at that. They will look at no people being tortured, but it's not so much of a concern for them. Yeah. If they had their piece of the pie and they say, we accept LGBT here, we accept NGOs which acknowledge minority rights, then they'll also respect these other rights. It's like, give me what I want, I'll also give you what I want.
Yeah.
So that's a Western world approach.
Interesting. And I want us to dig deeper into the whole aspect of international institutions. Solomon, international law, all right? The principle of sovereignty all countries are seen as equal by international standards, right? So I don't know, because we have seen the USA levy sanctions on certain individuals here in Uganda who have been accused for violating human rights. But I don't know the role of the holistic approach, the collective responsibility of the global community. We have seen the European Union coming out to say that, okay, the investment in ECOP will be put to halt unless certain issues around human rights are addressed. So it appears as if they are hot and cold, right? So I don't know, as we evaluate the torture and things like that, how are these international institutions performing? Or are they bound and limited by the principle of sovereignty of member states, that they can only do so much?
You see, when they closed the Office of the High Commissioner, the Office of the Human Rights Office of UN, I was one of the happy people.
Sure.
I was very happy. Why I was actually happy is they have no use here. Their relevancy is not seen anywhere. If it's funding a symposium, they will do that. You will never see a statement from that office for the violation of Kakwenza's rights. And I'm using Kakwenza just as a generic term, because there are very many people away from Kakwenza. We are making noise over Eric, but there are very many people that are still in those unknown places. Here, the members of parliament had media. They moved to places they suspect to be safe houses here in Kampala, and it was actually justified by the fact that security, the UPDF, blocked them from accessing these safe houses to see the state of the safe houses. And you see, when you try and internalize in international law, where a person is supposed to be detained is supposed to be a gazetted place in the laws of a country. That's number one. Two, the people arresting must be in uniform, not layer, given the circumstances. And that is appreciated in our Ugandan laws. Article
23?
Yes. Yeah. Number three, right now we have an issue before the judiciary, most especially magistrate courts and the criminal department of the High Court, where you'll see that prosecution is actually beyond 48 hours. Someone is going to spend 72 hours, is going to spend 3 weeks in custody, and they will be taken to court. That's if they fail to agree with the OC whether they have 1 million or not to bribe the police officers not to arraign them in court. And you see all these, when you try and interact with these people, they will tell you that we appreciate these facts. We've taken note of these. We see them. Petitions have gone to these people and evidence has been attached, but nothing has been done. All they have done is look on, and they will whisper that the agencies here fear for their lives as well. That's the truth. That's the truth. So to me, I think, like he stated it, there is a lot of hypocrisy with these international firms, most especially when it comes to certain rights. Certain rights, for example, freedom from torture, freedom from movement, and you realize that the funding is also a tug of war. A tug of war. But when it comes to things like LGBTQ, which is not a crime in Uganda, I still affirm, and I'll depend my submission on Kasha and Ozima and another versus Stone Holdings, where Chivuka actually reaffirms the state of sexual orientation as human dignity. Human dignity. But you'll actually see that when it comes to that, HIRAP, which is one of the leading organs to protect this sexual minority, will be given a lot of funding. A lot of funding. And Kidega, who has an organization that is made to actually relocate the Kakwenzas and the Mwesigwas and other torture victims, will actually not have capacity at that specific time because there is no money. There is no money to do those activities. And that still goes to the status quo. The status quo is one that intimidates international intervention. It is not true that we are out of imperialism. We are actually in modern day imperialism. A lot of business is done here in the interest of the Western powers. And it's actually backdoor business. So the fear is annoying the government, and all the benefits they are having here is limited or cut off. That is why it is happening as it is. There is intimidation on the side of Uganda to have international intervention. And the people that want to offer international intervention do not stand for what for what their intentions are supposed to be. They manifest protection of torture victims, but at the end of the day, practice restraint from confronting the situation directly. That's what I have to say.
Wow, very brilliant. Natasha, one of the core principles of natural justice is embedded in, I think, Article 44 of our Constitution that does put forward the aspect of a speedy, fair, and a speedy, fair trial. All right. Of recent, the Honorable Segirinya and Honorable Sewanyana have been released on bail, but those represent just the many other cases that have gone against the principle of a speedy trial. About how fair it is, I'll leave it to you and the viewers to examine. But how do you evaluate Uganda's legal system? Would you say there is free, speedy, and fair trial in Uganda? Or you want to be practical and say that challenges like insufficiency of our judicial courts at times affect the speediness of these trials? That because I think we have only one appellant court, so I don't know, are there practical challenges that are an impediment to realizing a free, fair, and speedy trial?
Thank you so much. My submission on that is, for political affiliated persons, people who are against the government or politically differ from the government, most of the times those are the people they torture a lot, or they deny that freedom most of the times. And these are the people who have brought out the image and who have represented the other people who are down there. I'll say down because we can't really see them. So freedom, it's on 70 on 30. Definitely there are people who get bail before the 48, who go to the court before the 48 hours. There are those people, but who are very few. I think it's 60 or 70 to 30. It's the freedom for people to see the judges is so less. Yeah, and it's because of the very few magistrates or the judges, and the other thing, the court wants to make money out of, they first frustrate you, then they ask you for a lot of money for bail, so you come when you're tired and you just want to get out. They frustrate you because for the 48 hours someone can stay in jail and say, okay, let me wait. But after that long time of frustrating you, you want to pay the money and leave. So that's also another strategy. Yeah.
All right. Fair enough. Paul, speaking of strategies, still on the aspect of torture, is that I have read The Art of War by Sun Tzu, and he argued that, part of the tactics used in war is that you must psychologically break down your opponent. All right. That is why you will get to hear stories like during the World Wars, certain soldiers were sodomized, all right, to break their psychological strength and to make them weak, all right. Even here in Uganda, the Buchoro case that happened, I think, in 1988, where certain actually members of the community were sodomized. So the point is, in the art of war, the opponent tends to break down the other opponent psychologically. Can you say that torture is being used by whatever organ, be it terrorist groups, be it, I don't know who in this case, is it being used as a way of creating terror to frighten Ugandans and make them fearful of not speaking up? Do you think it is being used by some entity as an art of war or as a terrorism? I don't know.
Earlier on,
because the motive is what I want us to talk about. The motive. Why would you torture someone to that extent?
Yeah, earlier on, I told us that when you read The Prince of, I still want to refer us to that book of Niccolo Machiavelli,
the Italian philosopher.
So he will be able to show you how one can consolidate power.
Yeah.
And one of the tactics that he gives, besides ensuring that people are kept in poverty, we've been in abject poverty for a very long period of time. So there's a very huge gap between the have and the have-nots. When you read Karl Marx, you will also be able to tell us deep. But then, in as far as torture is concerned, number one, the torture is actually meant to instill fear in people. So once people have fear and they know the moment I go on the street for any kind of demonstration, I will possibly have a live bullet. We've seen in our schools, UNSA has been trying to ask government to stop the use of bullets, live bullets on students.
Even rubber bullets.
Even rubber
they
bullets.
Cause injury.
Yes, they do. So it's psychologically breaking everybody, instilling a lot of fear in them, so that when the government says this should be done, nobody even wants to
Will challenge
it. So that aspect of fear is really, 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 and it's very strategic. Remember when you're approaching the past elections, you saw how
November
much
18th.
fear was instilled in people, to a point that when you see a man in uniform, he thinks he has made it and all the rest are useless, And people, so when people then do not have the courage to speak out what they believe in, they don't have the courage to actually confront situations the way they come, so they go back door, and as they refrain, then that becomes a stepping stone for them to continue business as usual. While this is happening, back door, what is happening? That's negotiations are taking place, So international communities will ask, they will have the cameras around, trying to get footages of torture. But at the end of the day, what is the impact of it anyway? Nothing, So still, I really think the aspect of fear which is being instilled in people is absolutely true.
Yeah. Council, let's talk about the writ to habeas corpus that produce an individual dead or alive within 48 hours in an official court of law, all right? I think this right in Uganda has been violated the most. That you can be incarcerated, held incommunicado, as many choose to refer to it, beyond the 48-hour rule. As we examine this particular right, you know that the ex parte Matovu case that later on took a different direction and went into Hans Kelsen theory and all those things and the political structure doctrine and etc. But the principle was that people are tried ex parte, that you don't have to be in court for a decision to be passed against you. So, as we discuss the writ of habeas corpus, must we relate it? Because we aren't talking about ex parte cases, that it is lawful for a judge to pass a judgment in your absence. All right? So I find that problematic because it then somehow justifies the 48. I think it's against the writ of habeas corpus. Because if courts go ahead to issue judgments, even without the presence of the accused, then how do we expect the accused to be produced within? So I don't know. I find an issue with the whole writ of habeas corpus vis-a-vis cases being conducted ex parte.
I would say yes and no. The right habeas corpus, you see,
and as you examine that, hopefully you can relate it to what we have been seeing between the leader of opposition and the prime minister, whereby the LOP is saying that Ugandans have been abducted and they are nowhere to be seen. Of course, there are allegations. They remain allegations. But, I mean, the aspect of the 48-hour rule, is it really a reality here in Uganda?
It's not a reality. That's the honest, harsh truth. Many times, even lawyers themselves, activists, people who speak out to challenge the status quo, justice is never delivered, especially on time. When you look at that article that talks about a speedy and fair trial, it's never respected. Because if you look at, let's say, the sanctions that were put on, or the heavy punishments that were put on Kakwenza, this guy was beaten so much that they brought him to the magistrate's court half dead. The man was barely standing. That's the honest truth. I'm not trying to take sides, but I'm being very objective and looking at current events from a legal lens. Because if someone who speaks out against what is not being done right is curtailed even more and more and more. Because I understand, according to what Kakwenza said, or according to most people who are abducted in these black sites. By the way, just to correct you, it's not an allegation. The families of these people who are being abducted have not seen the heads of the home for months, even some years. Especially someone who does not align themselves with the current government's interests. They are not seen for months. So by the time their lawyers apply for a writ of habeas corpus, that writ of habeas corpus, it might as well even be removed from the constitution. It's never respected. So proceeding ex parte, I'll also answer your question. You see, to proceed ex parte cuts across to all spheres of the law. If it's done in a civil case or a commercial case or anything that's not criminal, it's also beneficial to the plaintiff, the person who has brought the case. If someone is versing, let's say, UNOC, or let's say Uganda Road Fund, and they have written demand notices, they have filed a plaint, and the other party has not written its defense, its written statement of defense, and the bigger entity is not responding, then they can again go to the magistrate or judge and then write that, the other party is no longer interested in. We have tried to engage them, but they have not yet. So let's proceed ex parte. A judicial officer can say, I think this person is right. So they will give a judgment even in your absence. And once they do that, then you are obligated to doing what the judge has told you to do. Either you give compensation or what. Now that's in civil and criminal. How about in criminal? Now I'm going to criminal. In criminal, by the time they incarcerate a Kakwenza in courts, anyone who is an activist, and then they take them to a black site, they beat them, just when they know that this person's lawyer has requested for habeas corpus. Let's say today is what, 14th, and let's say that the judge has set a hearing for 20th, a date closer. If they have been torturing you from 31st of January up to now, they're then going to give you drugs. You know, these people are very intelligent. They're going to give you medicine and drugs to heal you very fast. In that, by the time you reach court, it just remains a small scar. Yet that small scar could have come from a knife even, just to cut you a little bit. So it takes you back to breaking down someone psychologically. By the time that activist is produced in front of the magistrate or judge, they almost can't say anything. They have so much on their minds to say, but they're being broken down psychologically. They have been made destitute. Or they're almost like a mad person. Yet initially, this was a bright standing individual in society. They were someone who people we would even look up to. But the moment someone speaks in this, I'll give an example. First, even leave alone human rights. I mean, like the whole torture bit. We also what happened at Entebbe International Airport. On social media, people were holding Civil Aviation Authority accountable. What did they do the next week? They issued out that poster saying that you can no longer take cameras. You can no longer take video footage or cameras at Civil Aviation Authority. Now, other entities which carry out normal government services are going to follow suit. Now, that limits our freedom of expression, because if I get my phone and then start taking a video of what's happening in town, let's say they're beating up a new person or BCJ, or even any other person who is not aligned to any party, but is speaking out the truth, an army officer is going to come and get your phone and smash it, and you can't do anything. You can't take him to court, the court martial. They'll rule in his favor. They'll find some way, they'll compensate you, but the point is that they have broken you down psychologically. Even if they buy you a better phone, they just don't want, they want to put it in your mind that you don't have any rights here. And once you try and hold us accountable on social media, then that's a problem. They can even, they have made us in such a way that you, I don't know, you have no rights.
Yeah, well, I think the point is the cajole you're thinking. Ndugu Counsel, the landmark decision in the case of Justice of Sussex that stated that justice must not just be done, but seen to be done. Now, as we bring this, I want us to compare with what Terry hinted on, the aspect of the court martials. Civilians being tried in the court martial.
You see, first and foremost, I'll appreciate the question you've forwarded to me, but before I answer it, I want to take it from him. Actually, note that other public places are going to follow suit to what civil aviation has done at Entebbe, but they are already doing it informally. I think recently at Buganda Road Chief Magistrate Court, I think that was last year in around May, if I might remember, I was looked up by a magistrate in their office.
Are you serious?
I was looked up by a magistrate in their office.
Wow.
And why I was locked up by a magistrate in their office was simply because Dr. Stella Nyanzi had gone and written on her Facebook page, and I'm sure the post is still there, of Dr. Stella Nyanzi, where she was asking why was Halava Musiri David and other activists taken back to Luzira, yet court had given them bail. Why had the magistrate asked for a bribe to actually see this happen? So what happened is, when we went in the morning to see to speak to the magistrate to give us a production warrant to have our people that were taken back to Luzira. Of course, the mistake wasn't with the magistrate. The mistake was with the prison warders. The prison warders, like I told you, in this country, everyone is a boss in their own way. They will not respect the law. So the prison warden had taken back the prisoners to Luzira without actually consulting the magistrate. So what happened is, when we went back to see how can we negotiate to see that maybe she gives us a production warrant. By negotiate, I mean convince her, give us a production warrant to have our people brought back. She signs the bail discharge forms. We pay and take them. So we found her furious. And she's like, you call Dr. Stella Nyanzi, tell her to put down that post she made. And she confiscated our phones. And the people I was with, one of them had not entered. We had only entered 2 people in her office. The other person pretended as if, actually, that's the only option he had. The other person pretended as if he didn't even know us. he also pretended to be a passerby to save himself. And it was understandable because maybe he would also be handcuffed like we had been handcuffed. But so it's not that they will follow suit. They're already doing it illegally. And when Stella called in at that particular point, when we were in court, I know she will watch this and she will know herself. When Stella called in at that particular point and I told her, you know what, Stella, this magistrate has locked us up in her office and she has instructed the police to take us to CPS and they want to prosecute us. That caused her to release us because she feared that maybe Stella is going to write again. So a lot of evil things are going on in these brackets, public offices, and these limitations, the psychological breakdown is going to permit this to go on. Corruption at its peak, it's already happening. And actually, to me, I think someone needs or a relevant party needs to come out and actually caution the civil aviation, because we knew whatever was going on in the airport simply because of citizen journalism. So if you've limited it, people can no longer express themselves.
But they are doing so in accordance with the given provision of the law. Because they quoted, I think, the Computer Misuse Act.
You see,
section...
But you see, it only came out when they were exposed.
Yeah, when they were exposed. So meaning now I cannot say that
I was asked for a bribe.
I was asked for a bribe. They will call it rumor because I can't justify my allegation.
You see, there is so much complacency and there's so much impunity that happens in our country. So what my brother is trying to say is that these things, these strong cautions by these institutions are ignored because they know that people do not know about the law. But once they are taken on, now you know we have now said that you can no longer take video footage at Entebbe Airport. So anyone who does it illegally, they will charge accordance with their HR provisions or with the law.
Yeah. Yes, Solomon.
So now going back to the question you posed before me, justice must be seen to be done, not said to be done. What is in Uganda is justice is said to be done.
So the trial of civilians in court-martial?
Actually, that is what I'm saying. And to actually justify my argument is that, one, we do have 3 court decisions, 2 from the High Court, 1 from the Constitutional Court, urging the court-martial, because when you try and look at the design of this general court-martial, it's not to discipline citizens or civilians. It's to discipline serving army officers. Even when you are a serving army officer right now and you retire tomorrow and you committed a crime tomorrow, you are not taken to the general court-martial. You are taken to a civilian court. So we have 3 decisions where that is why I'm saying that justice is not said to be done, rather seen to be done. It's said to be done. And what is happening in the general court-martial is, even when we have had these decisions, prosecution has continued. And that goes back to the bigger question we must answer, which is answered by Article 23 of the Constitution. Who must arrest us when we commit a crime? You realize that the civilians that have ended up in the general court-martial have been either arrested by the CMI, either arrested by the UPDF, ISO, and at the end of the day, they find themselves in the general court-martial. And what is surprising or shocking is the court officials in the GCM are lawyers. They have studied law and they have appreciated the legal principles, and they know that a civilian cannot be prosecuted in a general court-martial. He's supposed to be taken to a civilian court, a magistrate court, or a high court, given the circumstances or the statement of offense. But they have gone ahead to undermine the laws that are in place. And this is how we see these civilians end up in the general court-martial, which is an act that actually is condemned by every Ugandan, because the general court-martial is one that has no appreciation to the law. It's sentimental. That is why you see, even when recently we saw a video where one of the people that were arrested in Kalangala in 2021 was trying to protest. He passed his head through the dock and is trying to say, hey, okay, you have failed to charge us in 2 years or 3 years. Now, kindly, given the circumstances, please give us a verdict. Okay, give us a punishment. We know that I'm in Luzira. Because personally, I've been remanded before in 2020, and it was COVID time. I was in prison. And when you reach prison, you realize that most of the people there have no hope of getting bail. They don't know what bail is. They actually, some of them are political prisoners who their files were forgotten. I actually found a man who was arrested in 2007. 2007, and they are on remand.
At that time, remand will not be accounted for when his thing is
definitely tried. And you ask him what happens to the day you go to court, he's going to tell you that, you see, the officers said they can't find my file, and at times ABCD. This is nonsense or nonsensical. Nonsensical. So at the end of the day, you are going to cost a civilian.
Thank you. And on that costing, Terry, I'll bring you back much more later on the aspect of false imprisonment and malicious prosecution. Like, what remedies does someone have in case they have been falsely prosecuted, or in case the DPP loses interest in the case and files for a nolle prosequi? What remedies are there? Just much later. But for now, thank you very much, Solomon. I want to bring in Natasha. Alinda, he did mention the aspect of bail, and our criminal justice system is built on the principle of the presumption of innocence until proven guilty. And Article 28, Clause 1 is very clear on that. Now, the president has, to the contrary, come out to say that capital offenders or suspects of capital offenses should not be granted bail. So, I don't know. How do you perceive this? Do you appreciate the mischief behind the president's statements? Because he says that, okay, even when we haven't proved that you're guilty, but now what if you're guilty and you've committed an offense, and you being given bail would then mean that you can commit more offenses, you can kill more Ugandans, which puts a failure on his side as head of state, because he has a duty to protect Ugandans and their property. So I don't know, do you appreciate the principle also? So do you appreciate the mischief behind his reasoning, or you want to strictly argue this on the principle of the law? The law says that if I am innocent, if you're to prosecute me, have evidence, or don't arrest me before you have evidence. Where would you fall? On the legal or on the moral side of the debate?
Definitely, everyone is innocent till proven guilty. But we run back to the part of most of the African presidents wanting to stay in power for long. When you want to stay in power for long, you're going to have a big laundry basket with dirty laundry. So with that dirty laundry, you fear the public to come and know, or certain parties, because with that dirty laundry, they can pin you, they can just damage your strategy or your ambitions. So the president is trying to do all he can to stay in power. All he can, and he will do anything he will do to keep in position. So that's why that comes in. And you notice that came in where the political affiliated criminals, should I call them criminals? Suspects are very many in number, and they were making a lot of noise for the Western countries to come for rescue. So he had to put that so that he can reduce on the noise. So, but it is not right at all.
Okay, but then, put yourself in his shoes as a leader. And I'm not saying that people should be, prosecuted unfairly. But what I'm saying is that as a leader, you have a duty to protect citizens.
True.
There could be a reality that your DPP office is not sufficient enough to carry out quick investigation to, have evidence on time. There could be that actual reality. But at the same time, you owe Ugandans protection of their lives. So as a leader, would you find yourself between a rock and a hard place? That yes, if I grant bail to these guys, what if they're actually criminals? Okay, yes, court hasn't, pronounced itself, but what if they're criminals? And they are going to go out there and cause more havoc. So you're failing as a state. So I don't know, I'm finding it hard to really appreciate that there could be a balance in between those two.
Well,
One is a moral argument, one is a legal argument.
yeah, true. What you're saying is actually a state of dilemma, because the other side may be right, the other side may be wrong, but there is bail always has has restrictions,
Conditions,
yeah,
yeah.
conditions, and according to your crime, they give you those measures on what to follow, and most of the times you can't even get out of the country, maybe when it's on a medical term. So I feel like bail should just be there, because there are terms that govern the bail. Even if someone is a serial killer, they can put him in a room and maybe watch him over there. Yeah, but they shouldn't scrap off bail.
Yeah. All right, thank you. Paul, at the height of the Cold War, was a contestation between does the world go communism or capitalism? But I think largely the capitalists took the day. The question here is that capitalism believes that the ultimate point of democracy is actually economic freedom. That if you have capacity to actually make money and do all these things, that is an ultimate form of democracy. And I think you made the argument earlier on that if the state deprives you of money, then you somehow become a typical subject. Article 26 of the Constitution provides for rights to property. But at the same time, we have compulsory acquisition of land by government. That government can say, okay, this land belongs to you, but because we want to put here a road, we are going to take over this land. All right? But also all these land grabbing things that we hear about. All right? So can we say that, of course, even our poverty levels, I think there was a poverty index report that was released on Monday, I'm not sure, but the facts were appalling therein. So, economic freedom, the right to property. I don't know.
You know, you just reminded me of government programs that come to empower youth.
Yes.
We have,
Parish
development model, and so young people have to access those funds, which somebody said parish development model failed before it could start. And I laughed.
It was dead on arrival.
You are supposed to access money, and then there are conditions. Use that money, and you have to repay back after some time. That does not make you financially independent. You are conditioned, right? So all that you're going to be doing, you're actually investing someone's money to keep you in that kind of, your mental state is not clear. So you're not thinking about anything that will benefit you. Today we have a lot of cars that people are getting on loans. Now as you get a car on loan, you're paying for you instead of actually focusing on other things, your mind is on clearing the loan. At the end of the day, you are not progressing, right? Now, it's very unfortunate that we now have the state coming up to break people, disenfranchise them, take their land. What has been happening in Apa, for example, where people even lose their lives simply because a government is interested in a certain piece of land, if it's to be given out, the compensation is not equivalent to what the people are giving out. So I find it self-defeating. I find it very, very unfortunate that these kind of things are happening to the people. So there is really a lot of, as they try to empower people financially, the rationale is to disempower them financially so that they keep within a certain range and are easily monitored, so that system runs as they deem it fit. So in response, that's what I would say. It's really unfortunate.
All right, this has been very amazing. But our time is fast spent, and I'm now forced or compelled to invite you guys to give us your parting shots on the show. But because I had asked you for remedies regarding false imprisonment and also malicious prosecution, I'll give you just 2 minutes. Then the rest you'll have a minute each to give us your parting shots. So Terry, as I come towards the side.
Yes, I would just like a repeat on your question.
The question was, what remedies are available for someone who alleges that they were maliciously prosecuted, or in the case of false imprisonment, what remedies are there? Or in the case that the DPP loses interest in the case and files for a nolle prosequi, what then remedies do I have as someone who has been in incarceration for all this while and now the case is being dropped? I mean, how do I go about it? So what remedies are there? Can they file for damages?
Yes. You see, what normally happens is when someone has been incarcerated falsely or when they have been prosecuted maliciously, these two may look a bit different, but they have a lot of elements which are very similar. Because by the time someone has put you in jail, then that means that they have a certain agenda that they want to fit. I'll give you an example. When they put most crimes on, let's say, activists or maybe people who are against the ruling party or state, they're going to put also all sorts of things like he abused the person of the president, or maybe now I'll give you an example of, like, let's say Nicolas Opio. A very huge case was put on him of money laundering, but because he currently heads Chapter 4, which is his institution. So the fact that Nicolas speaks about human rights and receives a lot of funding from NGOs, the best way to be able to taint his name was to put on him such a very heavy crime. Now, money laundering is something which is called a capital offense. Now, I will also go back to what you had said earlier about what the president will say, that, you know what, if someone has been put a crime on, which is a capital offense, that person does not deserve bail. Now, this may serve his interest in a certain way, but it may also serve the people's interest in a certain way. He may be plotting for someone who may be against his interest. So if that person has been put on a big crime, like, let's say, causing financial loss or money laundering, then that person will not deserve bail. Now, I think I diverted from the point, but I was trying to show you that when someone is falsely incarcerated or malicious, let's look at malicious. Malicious means that this person has bad intentions against you. Moses, if I was in charge of Bank of Uganda and I freeze all of your accounts or mobile money transactions, that means I have malicious motives against you. I want to bully you down to the point that you cannot do anything.
Yeah.
So that person can then claim for damages. Maybe, let's say, business lost. Yeah. They can look at the time that was spent on remand. They can look at the time, the public humiliation. Most people who are maliciously prosecuted or who are falsely put in prison, these are in most cases public figures. These are people who are, let's say, of substance in the community. Now, by the time they've built their reputations, they also have to account for reputable damage.
Yeah.
So the remedies are related in both cases. If someone has been falsely incarcerated, then they'll, in most cases, ask for damages.
Wow. Then your last words on the show.
My last words on the show are that, first of all, I like Civic Space TV. I like the fact that everyone can express their views without fear or favor, without bias. I like the fact that people are not taking sides, that I'm for this political party or I support so and so. We are just speaking about things objectively. So, first of all, always to Civic Space TV for hosting me on their platform. I know how hectic it is to run an online platform which solely thrives on what the audience wants. The state in our country is worrying in certain situations, but we're progressing in some other aspects. But the ones which matter most to make the Ugandan as comfortable as possible will need a lot of work when it comes to that. We need a lot of work in terms of our human rights. We need a lot of work when it comes to respect for people's being and essence. I mean, when you look at social media and you're looking at people with flat iron buns, when you look at people appearing before courts and they have whiplashes, they are almost not being recognized by their families. The mental anguish that their families are going through, I think it's not right.
Thank you. Yes, Solomon, your last words in a minute.
For me, I'll actually continue mobilizing Ugandans wherever they are in their capacities to actually acquaint themselves with information, with the law, most especially regarding human rights, because you realize that at the heart of politics is human rights. And very many Ugandans are agreeing about this. Recently, when I was in the Pretty Nicole case, Pretty Nicole did not believe that actually she had been tortured. For her, her perception was that these guys were disciplining me because I had encroached on their man. So probably this is to all Ugandans,
It's
because
a mindset that we have.
yeah, it's a mindset that we have, and it's not a crime for anybody to complain or for anybody to raise their voices against human rights violations, as very many people want to purport it.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, Alinda.
My last words are, we are putting a lot of attention to Article 44, which is valid and we understand, we appreciate, but there is these two human rights that need attention. The right to health. People, our health is so sad. It is on tears. When you cannot, you can, if you're so poor, okay, if you're so poor, you cannot get any health attention from anyone. Even the ones who go to public hospitals, they have to give in a bribe to be taken care of. If so, even there is this right to education. People are seated home. Public schools, they have to pay. You talked about it. Private schools, it's like you're buying a plot of land. So those two should be catered for before you talk about the Article 44, because Article 44, the people may have put themselves in that situation, political. They talk about political parties, but these two have nothing to do with the political parties. They are just innocent citizens who want good health and good education. So those two should really be worked on. Thank you.
Wow, brilliant. Yes, Paul.
Oh, thank you. You know, one of the people who wrote on justice, I want to quote Boris Cranston, who says matters in regards to human rights, matters to be treated with very high importance, that of paramount importance, and violation of such matters is actually a grave affront to justice, meaning that when we choose to pay a deaf ear to matters of human rights, when we choose to be indifferent to matters of human rights, we do not then change the status quo for the better. We do not provoke justice to prevail in societies. And once that is happening, definitely we shall then go into a state of anarchy, a state of chaos. And at the end of the day, we'll lose millions of lives. So as Ugandans, I want us to interest ourselves with matters of importance, such as human rights, such that we can seek justice to those who are disenfranchised in any way, and be able to give our country what we deem necessary and fit for the next generation. Thank you so much for hosting me, and thank you, my colleagues. I'm humbled to have shared a panel with two lawyers. Yeah, and of course, my sister here. It has been very, very inspiring, and I must say this has been a good space for me. Thank you very much.
Well, what more can I say except to thank you guys. Council Terry, Comrade Councils here, Terry and Solomon, Comrade Alinda, and Comrade Paul. Thank you for making the time to be on this week's episode of the Youth Roundtable. And of course, Rashid and the team, thank you for ensuring that our show airs right on time. Well, the last words from me are the words of Che Guevara, that if you tremble at the sight of an injustice, then you're a comrade of mine. But also, an injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. But also, the late Desmond Tutu had this to say, that in whatever you do, just do right, all right? Because today, you're on the side that is meting or perpetrating injustice. Tomorrow, you could find yourself on the other side of the receiving end of an injustice. So just do right. That brings us to the end of this show. See you next week, same time, same place. Bye-bye.
Media.